Today, we're going to dig into a problem that pretty much every single entrepreneur hits eventually, the plateau. You know the feeling. You're working harder than ever, but the business just isn't growing the way it used to. So, what's going on? Let's break down why this happens and talk about a huge mindset shift that can totally reignite your growth.
I mean, this is the big frustration, isn't it? You built your whole business on pure effort, on sweat equity. But now it feels like putting in more hours doesn't really move the needle. It just makes you more tired. This isn't a sign you've lost your touch. It's a sign that the rules of the game have changed, and your strategy has to change right along with it.
You know, this quote just nails the problem perfectly. It feels so productive to jump in and get your hands dirty, right? To handle things yourself. You get that immediate hit of satisfaction. But that feeling, it's a trap. It's pulling you away from the strategic work that only you, as the leader, can actually do to scale the business. And that trap has a name. It leads us right to our first big idea, the brute force plateau. Just think of it as the first major hurdle in your business's life, and honestly, it's where so many promising companies get completely stuck.
Look, when you're just starting out, brute force is your superpower. You're the one answering every call, running every job, doing all the paperwork. You are the business. And it's simple, right? The more effort you put in, the more growth you see. Easy.
Here's the catch, though. A growing business is always a changing business, and the very thing that worked at the beginning actually starts to hold you back. The strategy that got you here, doing absolutely everything yourself, is now the anchor keeping you from moving forward. You're trying to solve bigger, more complex problems with the same old tool. And if you stay in this phase too long, the result is, well, it's painfully predictable. You get completely burned out. Your growth just flatlines. The business feels incredibly busy. I mean, everyone's running around putting out fires. But then you look up after 6 months and realize you haven't actually gone anywhere. You're just spinning your wheels.
Okay, so how do you break out of this vicious cycle? The answer is all about finding and then fiercely protecting what we call your high-value zone. This is really the key to unlocking true leverage. So let's define what that actually means.
High-value work isn't just stuff you're good at. It's this very specific, kind of small overlap of activities that create massive results from a relatively tiny input. And notice that word fragile. I want you to focus on that. This zone is so easily crowded out by all the noise of the day-to-day business if you're not actively protecting it. So what's so cool here is how we can break this zone down. Think of it like a three-part filter. First, what are your unique talents? What are you just naturally good at? Second, what gives you energy instead of draining it? Because you have to be able to sustain this work, right? And third, and this is the most critical part, what actually moves the needle for the business in a huge way? Where those three circles overlap, that's the magic. That's your zone. So, finding your zone is one thing, but staying in it? Oh, man, that is the real challenge. The urgent demands of the day are constantly trying to pull you away. And this brings us to what we call the danger of drift. It happens so slowly you barely notice it. A small task here, a little fire to put out there. And before you know it, your entire day is just consumed by things way outside your high-value zone. You're right back on that treadmill, being busy but not actually productive. You're working in the business again instead of on it. And this comparison really shows why we drift. Urgent work is addictive. It gives you an immediate dopamine hit of, I did something. You solved a problem, you checked a box. High-leverage work, on the other hand, stuff like strategic planning or building a new system, it often feels slow. It's abstract. The payoff is way down the road. Urgent work puts out fires. High-leverage work prevents them from ever starting.
And over time, a whole culture gets built around this. The person who responds to emails the fastest or who's always available to jump on a last-minute problem, they're the one who gets praised. The business starts to value being reactive more than being proactive. And so the system itself, unintentionally, pushes everyone, including you, away from that high-value work.
So how do we fix this? How do we retrain ourselves and our business to actually value the right things? Well, it takes a really conscious, deliberate, and frankly, sometimes difficult strategic shift. It's a move away from doing to designing. This is so important. High-value work does not just happen by accident. You have to carve out the space for it. You have to defend that time and that focus like your life depends on it, because the default setting of any busy organization is to just eat up that time with urgency and noise. You've probably heard of the 80-20 principle, right? The Pareto principle. Well, at this stage of your business, it stops being some cool concept from a business book, and it becomes your literal day-to-day operating manual. You have to be relentless about finding and then executing on that 20% of activities that will give you 80% of your results. I mean, this chart says it all. Just look at the insane difference in output. Most of our effort, that huge 80% bar on the right, it generates so little real impact. The entire strategic game is to shrink that bar way down and pour all of that reclaimed energy into the small, high-leverage things that create exponential growth.
And what this does is it completely changes the fundamental question you ask yourself every single morning. It's not about how can I cram more tasks into my day. It's about which of these few actions will actually move us forward. It's a huge shift from focusing on activity to focusing on impact.
And that leads us to the final and maybe the most counterintuitive piece of this whole puzzle, the discipline of doing less, but doing it on purpose.
I know it sounds totally backward, but it is absolutely true. The companies that break through these plateaus and really scale, they are not the ones who just add more stuff to their to-do list. They are the ones who have mastered the art of strategic elimination. They focus all their resources on what truly matters, and they are ruthless about cutting out the rest.
So how do you actually do this? Well, it's a pretty simple 4-part discipline. First, you have to get brutally honest about identifying that low-leverage work. Then, once you see it, you ask, can I reassign this to someone else? If not, okay, can I systemize it so it requires way less of my energy? And if all else fails, you ask the most powerful question of all. Can we just stop doing this completely?
As the leader, your job is to evolve. You have to graduate from being the chief doer of everything to being the chief thinker, the chief strategist, the designer of the business. Your goal is to work yourself into a position where you are only doing the things that nobody else can do.
And let this be a really clear warning. The comfort of your old habits, that feeling of being productive just because you're busy, is the single biggest threat to your future growth. Letting go of that comfort is the price you have to pay to get to that next level.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. This isn't about overhauling your entire life tomorrow. It's about starting small. What is one high-leverage activity you can identify, and how are you going to carve out and protect just 1 hour this week to focus only on that? Because that, right there, is where the change begins.